During an encounter, unwilling to kill her opponent, Sora pulls out a necklace, hoping to exchange it for forgiveness and friendship. The dragon's claws reached out, accepting the gift, but with a condition. Sora's compassionate heart had to remain intact. When the two sides clashed, a massive column of fire engulfed the gigantic monster. This left Sora completely confused, not understanding what was happening. He turned to his companion, muttering that he couldn't understand why this time was different from when they signed the contract. The chain wrapped tightly around the neck of a slimmer figure, officially sealing the agreement. As the flames died down, Sora lowered her hands and stopped covering her eyes, only to be stunned by an unbelievable realization. When Sora looked up, a fiery woman met his gaze, vowing to become his strength. At that very moment, sometime before, news of the failed summoning ritual had spread throughout the royal palace, creating an atmosphere of tension and doubt. The king, enraged, slammed his scepter to the ground, demanding an explanation. The hero summoned from another world should possess power on par with the monster lord. But among the group of people from that other world, Sora lacks any special skills, possessing only basic alchemy magic. The young student couldn't deny this, but justified it by saying that they were the ones who forced him to participate in the summoning ritual. Knowing the situation was unfavorable, Sora secretly studied his skills and discovered a series of secondary skills, such as identification, construction, synthesis, transformation, and extraction. Sora tested her first skill, checking each of her companions around her. Their names and skills are revealed one after another. Akira possesses heroic skills. Kanji is the god of destruction and always mocks him, while Nana, the witch, stands beside him, grinning mischievously. As for Mai, a saintly woman, she mocked Sora for lacking any special or useful skills. Despite attempts to explain that alchemy possesses many useful skills, but Akira's loud voice interrupted him, criticizing Sora, who was weak and lacked special skills, for not being able to join this strong group and only hindering the team's coordination. Cornered, Sora tried to justify herself, but before she could say anything, a powerful kick from Kanji landed. Kanji trampled on Sora like a worthless worm, when the hero suggested that it would be best to call in the weaklings to drag the whole group down. This was harmful to everyone, so they had the idea of getting rid of him from the castle completely. The king pondered, but then affirmed that it would still be detrimental if they were to discard the outcast arbitrarily. While talking to his servants, the king gave orders, saying that they no longer needed the young boy. The servant understood immediately, acted swiftly, and the crystal in his hand began to glow. They intended to exile Sora to the monster forest, leaving him to die a hopeless death. But at that very moment, he was suddenly lifted off the ground. The boy was bewildered, wondering what was happening, but there was nothing he could do. A cosmic vortex from above began to engulf him. He looked over at Akira, who finally spoke up, explaining that the three men had been summoned to accompany the two women. In other words, there's an outsider, and you should learn to sense the situation. Sora could hardly believe her ears when she heard that she was about to die for a reason. So absurd it was unbelievable. And then, in the blink of an eye, he vanished, swept away in a blinding flash of light. His skeptical cries echoed through the monster forest, where colossal creatures roamed freely. He coughed violently, falling over from the sudden displacement, wondering why he had to endure all this when he didn't want to be summoned from his own world. Finally, after a while, he had a chance to look around and found himself in a strange forest. He wondered if he had really been transported there. In the sky, a gigantic creature soared. Clearly not an ordinary bird. His heart was in turmoil, and then he remembered the words of the palace servant, realizing that he had been banished to this place. But all around him there was nothing but darkness and an eerie silence. The boy repeatedly tried to summon the status window, but without success. In his despair, he tried to calm himself down, hoping to find strength in alchemy. As his eyes were glued to the screen, a gigantic monster, resembling a rooster, suddenly appeared from behind. Quick assessment skills confirmed it was a cockatrice. Immediately, the forest erupted in terrifying screams and hisses as the beast pursued him, who was hastily fleeing. He still couldn't understand why such a creature was there when the enemy attacked. A powerful blow shattered the ground beneath his feet, tossing him into the air before slamming him back down, sending him flying like an arrow. He fell heavily to the ground, wincing in pain and struggling to get up. Things were bad, but that couldn't stop them from getting worse. As Sora tried to think of a way to escape, a roar echoed through the forest, shaking the ground. Sora looked up and saw a monster flying in the sky. The creature swooped down and used its sharp claws to seize the cockatrice. Based on his assessment skills, it was an enraged wyvern, the same monster that had flown past when he first arrived. Determined to find a way out of her perilous situation, Sora stepped back while the two monsters fought fiercely. However, he was shocked to discover that the ground behind him had collapsed, plunging him into a deep abyss. While the young man was desperately calling for help, the cockatrice slammed the dragon's head against the hard ground and clawed vigorously to signal victory. The fall from the depths echoed with a deafening crash, the sound reverberating strangely throughout the cave. Sora woke up and found himself surrounded by several twinkling green lights. This left him bewildered, looking around, not knowing where he was. The faint light from above reminded him that he had fallen into a cave. As he tried to stand up, a sharp pain struck his hand. Assessment skills revealed that his hand bone was severely fractured. Things got worse when he discovered a deep gash in his ribs, probably all from the fall. Checking his condition, he found the injuries were slowly draining his strength. Sora's health was gradually deteriorating. The pain was tearing his body apart, and the situation was getting worse as his wounds showed no signs of healing. If things continue like this, death will come to him in an instant, but he refuses to give up. He cannot die in these terrible and absurd circumstances. Sora looked around for something that could help her, when suddenly she heard a strange sound coming from nearby. A bizarre creature was dragging itself across the ground, making a soft growling sound. The assessment indicated it was a goblin general, its body nearly shattered, with only a sliver of strength remaining. It refused to die, clinging desperately to life. Sora wondered if this monster had collapsed beneath the ground earlier, but more importantly, he saw the bag that the Goblin General was desperately trying to reach. Inside that bag was a bundle of restorative herbs, an incredibly powerful healing ingredient. With that bag, Sora would surely be saved from her injuries. He gasped for breath, his heart pounding with pain, his mind racing with questions about his next move. Could he steal the bag without the goblin noticing? If it resisted before he got the bag, he would hardly survive. But he didn't want to die, at least not in this situation. His gaze stopped at the monster's axe lying nearby. With unwavering determination, Sora quickly grabbed it. In this situation, there was no other choice but to grip the weapon tightly and do what needed to be done. Upon noticing someone, the goblin turned around and saw Sora brandishing her axe, gritting her teeth in determination. A scream of agony echoed throughout the cave. Then smoke began to rise from the wound in Sora's side, as if he were closing the wound himself by burning it. Sora breathed a sigh of relief. He knew the healing grass was working well, and he had temporarily avoided death. As its name suggests, the grass can truly heal all things, including broken bones and cuts. Furthermore, thanks to the encounter with the Goblin General, his level jumped from 1 to 95. The only thing left now was the magic stone in his palm, which he had taken from the defeated monster. He had screamed in confusion and horror the first time he saw it fall out of the monster's mouth. Along with that stone, there are other magical stones, including one belonging to the Orc King. In games, when encountering such items, players can immediately understand their effects and use them appropriately. To test it out, Sora opened the alchemy window, curious to see what she could do with these magical stones. Sora experimented with several secondary skills and eventually mastered the extraction skill. Instantly, the magic stones glowed brightly, then vanished in a thick cloud of smoke that enveloped his body. Immediately, Sora felt the power of the Orc King and the Azura skill of the Goblin General flowing into him. He cheered with joy at his success, becoming even more excited when he realized the Orc King's strength was 3 times his own attack power. Next, he tossed a rock into the air, then used Azura to slash it down in a flurry of attacks. This skill allows him to unleash countless slashes in an instant, as long as he has a weapon in his hand. In fact, he could acquire skills easily thanks to alchemy, which made him wonder why this skill was so undervalued. Whatever the reason, Sora found new hope in this ability. Sora's stats increased dramatically, and he also learned new skills. Unlike before, he could now even stand firm in front of a cockatrice. As he was thinking this, a figure appeared behind him. Sora sensed its presence, slowly turned around, and cursed her fate. Sora was determined to strike first and act swiftly. The giant bird swung its claws, plunging them deep into the ground where he stood, its murderous eyes fixed on him. However, Sora dodged in the nick of time, even leaping onto the walls with incredible speed. He himself couldn't understand how he could move so fast. While airborne, looking down at his enemy, he descended calmly. He wondered what had just happened and how he had managed to do it. Perhaps that's the effect of leveling up, and now he can choose to run away to save his life. However, Sora knew this wasn't the right solution. The forest above was teeming with monsters, and this wasn't the time to run away. Especially now that he was stronger. He was determined not to die in a place like that. He gripped the axe handle tightly. Sora declared to herself that she would survive and would surely escape the forest unharmed. With that determination, he leaped high into the air, preparing for a rematch with the monster. Attacking from above, he swung his axe down at the ferocious beast, but was repelled by its thick, steel-hard scales. Seeing the hard material beneath the feathers, he wondered why this bird had scales. But there was no time for such thoughts. It lunged at him, and he counterattacked by leaping forward to drop a jury on its neck. Fortunately, this attempt was successful this time, as the successive slashes mixed it together, and the enemy screamed in pain. In this way, he might be able to get past the odds and somehow manage to win. His hopes didn't last long, as another scaly creature attacked him from a different angle, slamming him to the ground, rendering him immobile. I felt the weight of something pressing down on my whole body. Sora tried to understand what had just happened. His eyes settled on a huge, edible object attached to the cockatrice's tail. He pushed aside the confusion in his head, focused on the current situation, and used the Orc King's power to escape from it. He thought that with this immense strength, his axe would pierce through the monster's scales. However, instead of cutting through, the axe blade was repelled by the thick, hard scales, shattering in his hand and leaving only a shallow wound on the monster's body. Sora stared at the broken axe in disbelief, unable to believe her eyes. Then the enraged monster immediately threw him far away. As Sora tried to seize the opportunity and stand up, the air around them suddenly moved in a strange way. The cockatrice shrieked loudly and flapped its wings, using the storm-like wind to hurl Sora away. The blade of the wind-sucking skill tore through the young man's body, despite his desperate attempts to defend himself. The situation quickly deteriorated. The narrow path left nowhere to hide. Sora had no choice but to dash towards the wall and jump to the ground, using her healing grass to treat her wounds. However, he couldn't keep taking blows. Retreating would save his health, but using the old method would only make him an easy target. Therefore, fighting in open space was the best option. The beast roared and chased after him, its roar echoing throughout the cave. Although the wound healed thanks to the healing grass, but without weapons at hand, using Azure is no longer an option. While racking her brains for another way to cope, Sora unexpectedly discovered an area glowing with a faint blue light. He stood speechless, his eyes wide with surprise as he saw brilliant blue crystals covering a corner of the cave. The stones on the cave walls and ceiling all glowed. This made him wonder if it was the same blue light he had seen when he woke up earlier. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was mithril ore, a legendary mineral. This mithril ore type surpasses the hardness and toughness of ordinary steel. This gave Sora a crazy idea. Sora recalled its tough characteristics. He considered using it as a raw material, combined with alchemy, to create a powerful new weapon for himself. His thoughts were interrupted by the screech of a cockatrice coming from nearby. It was almost here. Time was running out, Sora had to work quickly. The alchemist's hands sank deep into the ore, which seemed to melt under the effect of his liquefaction technique. He hastily proceeded to oxidize the material, thinking that this weapon would be similar in size to the previous one, but it's been tempered to be harder and faster than anything else. The cockatrice let out one last roar, and Sora began forging his weapon, envisioning something unbreakable. Sora concentrated intensely, yearning for the sword to appear sooner, a weapon powerful enough to defeat the enemy before him. Finally, he aimed accurately. Meanwhile, the sword gradually takes shape from hilt to blade. When the weapon is complete, he roared, combining his immense power with Azura. Sora swung his new sword and sliced through the monster's body, a complete victory for him in his first battle. Both warriors fell to the ground, one lifeless. Sora was unable to move or regain her strength. Sora checked the situation and realized that his MP was depleted after using too many skills continuously. This is really dangerous in combat, and he promised to be more cautious when touching his creations in the future. Sora looked back at her achievement with satisfaction. He realized that alchemy wasn't as useless a skill as others thought. In fact, it was alchemy that saved his life, proving its full value even in combat, as clearly demonstrated by the monster's corpse lying behind him. This proves that his skills are not useless and that there is still hope for him. With that thought in mind, Sora looked up at the sky, her heart filled with renewed determination. He told himself and everyone else that he would escape this forest alive. As soon as he uttered those words, the silhouette of a dragon flew across the sky. 3 weeks have passed since Sora was abandoned and arrived in the monster forest. From that experience, he learned that terrifying monsters were always lurking, waiting for their next prey. And this forest is also full of dangerous, poisonous plants that grow rampant and spread everywhere. Sora still had no clue about the true size of the forest, nor did she know if she could ever escape. Fortunately, he was able to level up despite all the difficulties, thanks to defeating many monsters and earning experience points each time he fought. Today, he went out hunting again, armed with the bow and arrows he had made himself, aiming at an unsuspecting wild boar. The arrow flew straight, piercing through the pig's thick skin. It brought the pig down in a single blow. His new weapon proved useful, effectively expanding his hunting range. Having become accustomed to life in the forest, Sora brought the pigskin near the stream where he camped. washing away the fat and oil using his liquefaction technique. Then he confidently tossed them out of the water. Sora combined the molecules to create the final product. He smiled with satisfaction as he looked at the tanned, peach-colored pigskin in his hands. Emerging from the water, he thanked alchemy, realizing that no one could process leather so easily. Using his construction skills, which required only his feet, he summoned a steel rod from the ground and used it to suspend the skin. While contemplating how to process the meat, he initially planned to dry everything he had gathered, but perhaps trying new flavors wouldn't be a bad idea after all. After thinking for a while, he decided to try a little bit right now. He quickly lit the fire, preparing the frying pan over the flickering flames. Sora uses her butchering skills to marinate the pork with peach and apricot, slicing it into thin pieces and placing them on the pan. He added a touch of smoothness and sweetness from the southern fruits he had just picked nearby. Finally, sprinkle some rock salt over the meat. Over the blazing fire, he cooked the perfect dish, plating it without looking. Then he placed the pork teriyaki with plum sauce on top, topping it with a delicious fruit sauce. He clasped his hands together, thanked him for the meal, and eagerly enjoyed it. As he ate, he exclaimed excitedly because the food was so delicious. This was the first time he had used southern fruits, and he was truly delighted with the excellent results. The dish was incredibly delicious. Sora decided to try more flavors in the future because this dish was a resounding success. However, as silence enveloped them, he suddenly realized a painful truth. He talked to himself too much, something he didn't realize at first because he was so desperate, only doing it to survive each day. But now that he has managed to survive in this forest, he must face the reality that he is completely alone. He had no one to talk to. All he could find around him was food or enemies. Just then he heard a strange noise, and he quickly turned around, realizing that something was running across the river. He wondered about the source of the noise, feeling as if a battle was taking place somewhere in the forest. Then he saw a magical slime, frightened, hopping and running away, being chased by a pack of wolves. Sora looked down at the pitiful scene from above, and even without checking the information, he knew what was happening. Sora immediately realized the slime was a weak monster, and the pack of wolves chasing it weren't particularly strong either. However, as usual, a slime couldn't possibly fight off an entire pack of wolves. The slime leaped forward, hurtling towards the tree where Sora was standing. The slime's eyes, filled with tears, looked at him as if pleading for help. For the first time in a long time, he felt something deep inside him being stirred. Although it looked weak, it was still a monster, and he had no reason to interfere. However, when he saw the scene, he couldn't just stand by and watch. He jumped down, positioning himself between the slime and the pack of wolves. He felt he couldn't ignore this bullying. Sora couldn't just stand by and watch. He took down the first wolf. The slime-filled creature grunted in relief while the other beast snarled at the man as he attacked another. The other two circled around behind him and lunged forward as if they knew they could use their teammate to distract him. Luckily, he was skilled enough not to fall for such tactics and instead sliced them all in half. That means he felt something was wrong because the creature's coordination was too good. As he looked toward the trees, Commander Wolf appeared, and as expected, it was using its resonance skill. Once Sora had chosen his target, he immediately charged in, using Ashura to finish it off in the blink of an eye. The battle ended instantly, and the Wolf Commander's magic stone was flung out of his body. Seeing their leader defeated, the remaining wolves panicked and fled. Finally, he had a chance to check on the slime's condition, feeding it some healing grass to help it recover from its wounds. As the slime chewed on the grass, the young man realized that living alone must be very dangerous. But he also secretly felt the loneliness within it. He has no right to speak about other people. Sora received the Wolf Commander's resonance skill, and upon closer observation he discovered it could enhance teammates and synchronize them with himself. However, this vague understanding made him cry out in frustration because he had no one to use it on. Sora collapsed to the ground, feeling desperate and abandoning the slime, panicking and not knowing what to do. In that moment, Sora longed to have someone by her side. Just then, Sora heard a small sound coming from his body and saw the slime clinging to his shoulder, gently patting his head as if to comfort him. The monster jumped to the ground, attracting his attention, then circled around him once. He couldn't believe what was happening, doubting whether they were really trying to comfort him. His guest made the slimy creature giggle and jump around with joy. Meanwhile, he couldn't hold back his tears, moved by the other person's sincere gesture. He apologized for his emotions. He hadn't expected to cry just from having the chance to talk to someone. Placing his hand on his chest, he felt a pang of emotion. The slime creature smiled again, patting its chest as if to say that he could talk to it, full of gratitude. Sora suddenly had an idea and suggested they become companions. He said that the skill they had just used could also help them become stronger. Using their resonance skills, the two connected, waiting for something to happen. However, nothing happened. Confused by the situation, he checked the status window and discovered a fake secondary skill that needed to be trained and activated. Following the instructions, a vow necklace suddenly appeared between his hands, automatically wrapping around the slimy creature's neck. The vow necklace quickly sank deep into the slime creature's loose body, melting away in just seconds. A small cloud appeared above its head, and a notification window announced that it had officially become a member of Sora's team. However, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed that the creature was so weak, even though it had survived alone for so long. Now that they're teammates, Sora thinks she should give it a name. Because the slime kept repeating the word Myuu, he decided to name it Myuu, which made it extremely happy. From that moment on, Sora trusted Myuu and its new life as a companion. A little while later, when Sora put the basket of mushrooms down, Sora hurriedly asked the slime creature if it had eaten any poisonous mushrooms in the area, and saw Myuu chewing and nodding. Sora frantically pried open Myuu's mouth, desperately trying to save it before it died. However, things didn't go as he expected. His assessment revealed that the slime wasn't poisoned at all, but had simply acquired immunity from this thoughtless and reckless act. He realized that Myuu must have acquired that ability from eating poisonous mushrooms. It turns out that the ability to transform what it eats into its own strength is the very essence of the gluttonous skill that the slime possesses. The fact that it remains unharmed after eating poisonous food proves that nothing is inedible to it. However, this is a very strong possibility, especially considering the dangerous ecosystem of this forest. Upon realizing this, Sora felt she might have underestimated the abilities of her new companion. Myuu suddenly leaped high into the air, chasing after a wolf, appearing right above its head and abruptly increasing its body weight. Myuu crushed the beast to the ground. Now, dealing with the creatures that once hunted them is no longer a problem. When Sora praised Myuu, the slime unexpectedly spoke up, claiming to be his partner. A moment passed, and then Sora suddenly realized Myuu had just spoken to him for the first time. Checking the status window, he saw that Myuu had reached level 80, and a surprising skill had appeared: the ability to speak. Their camp echoed with joyful cries as the slime devoured its food, its mouth always stretched into a wide grin. If that's the case, Sora has countless questions to ask and begins a discussion to learn more about the forest. The two continued to chat for a long time, with Myuu sharing everything it knew. In short, there were 4 powerful monsters ruling the forest, each controlling a separate territory. First, there are the beluga whales, whose enormous size causes massive destruction. Secondly, the phoenix brings harmony to the forest from the sky, controlling thunder and lightning. Third is the wolf king, a solitary creature. He wields an icy blade to cut down anyone who comes near. Finally, there's Wang Long, also known as Tarrant, who mercilessly incinerates all his opponents. Not only because of its vastness, but also because of the powerful presence of these 4 monsters, the forest became an inescapable and impenetrable cage. In the context of the game, this forest is an area that is unlocked after the player completes all remaining missions. This is an endless dungeon after the ending, where players come to challenge themselves once more. Since it's also an ideal place for confinement, the only way to escape is to sneak past these 4 creatures. Sora tried to remain silent, hoping to stay away from the monster without being detected. Suddenly, a blazing light appeared, and a gigantic figure plummeted to the ground, incinerating everything around it. Sora initially thought it was a meteor, but amidst the raging flames he noticed sharp claws, glowing red scales, and enormous wings. When he realized it was a dragon, the entire forest seemed to burst into flames. The colossal dragon stood in the midst of the raging fire like a tyrant, ruthlessly burning everything in its path. That was Wang Long, famous for his brutal strength. However, strangely, the dragon was screaming in pain, its body covered in deep wounds. When the forest burst into flames, its power blew away everything in its path. Myuu shrieked because of the heat, and Sora quickly told it to hide under his hood, as getting closer to the center would only make them burn more intensely. The fire can engulf an entire forest in its fiery embrace. The giant dragon that Sora had seen earlier was now lying in the midst of the raging fire, slumped to the ground. He found the dragon and confirmed that it was indeed the king dragon Tarrant. It lay weakened on the ground, its body tattered. Checking the status window, he saw that the monster had numerous fatal wounds, like a mobile battlefield. Furthermore, the dragon was suffering from frostbite, suggesting it may have just been through a fierce battle. Sora suddenly realized that this might be a warrior capable of injuring the Dragon King and inflicting frostbite wounds. Just then, the dragon stood up and spoke in human language, asking who was there. With a powerful roar, it spewed a fierce stream of fire from its body. Sora only had time to use her construction skills, creating a wall from the ground to stop the fire. The dragon was surprised, not understanding why magic was being used, especially a skill that could extinguish its heat. Even more surprisingly, that magic was cast by a human, a race not supposed to exist in this forest. When asked to speak, Sora raised her hand, asserting that she had no ill intentions and had simply come to investigate after seeing the dragon fall from the sky. Wanglong shared his feelings, saying he had no interest in bloodshed against anyone who could communicate. However, its wounds came from a battle with the Wolf King, which ended with the cold-blooded Alpha's victory. The dragon challenged the other creature to a fight, attempting to protect its territory. This surprised Sora. She never expected the notorious tyrant to bother protecting another creature. Taken by surprise, the dragon called out to him, rising up in a severely injured state and asking for help in exchange for an explanation of the battle. Recalling the skill with which she had previously blocked the flames, it assessed Sora as a powerful warrior, worthy of being a warhorse for the ruler. Facing death, the dragon begged Sora to protect the peace of the forest. If it disappears, the forest will descend into chaos. However, Sora insists that this is not something anyone would want. The dragon only cared about the forest, insisting that it would be fine. At the same time, the dragon expressed its intention to entrust its territory to humans. Sora apologized, and he stated that he could not give an answer immediately. Even Myuu couldn't understand, so he emphasized and reiterated his goal. First and foremost, to leave this forest. For that reason, Sora had once considered defeating the dragon, but then he realized that it truly possessed compassion, enough to care for other creatures. With those words, Sora extended her hand, inviting Wanglong to join her team and become a part of them as a normal part of the group. This was an absurd offer, given that the dragon was already on the brink of death. Sora, with her alchemist abilities, crafted a vow bracelet, and Sora explained his skill, an ability that can enhance the strength of those with whom he makes a covenant. He didn't want the dragon to die under his protection, so he promised to save its life once he had sworn allegiance to it. However, if the dragon refused, Sora vowed to protect its only wish. This surprised the dragon, and out of curiosity about this human, it agreed to the offer, but on the condition that Sora not forget her kind heart. With that vow, the fiery dragon Lindworm agreed to grant Sora its power. Sora smiled at it, introducing herself and her companion, Myuu. He held up the engagement ring, saying it was their promise. Wanglong immediately accepted it, with no intention of breaking his vow. When it held the ring, the entire area suddenly erupted into a giant column of fire, engulfing the monster and catching both of them by surprise. Sora was confused, and he asked if this was how he and Myuu had fulfilled their pact. At that moment, another figure emerged from the flames. A woman in human form. She looked at Sora with sharp, scrutinizing eyes. The column of fire finally subsided, revealing a woman, still enveloped in her own flames, but wearing a familiar accessory around her neck. Sora was completely stunned by the woman's unexpected appearance. Meanwhile, she looked at herself in surprise, wondering what had just happened. She moved her limbs, carefully examining her strange new form. Neither of them could have imagined that she would transform into a human, and Sora guessed that it must have been thanks to her own abilities. When she confided that she still felt uncomfortable because she lacked scales, Sora took off her jacket and told her to wear it to feel temporarily more comfortable. With the jacket, she was covered by a thin piece of fabric, but it was enough to make her feel much more comfortable than before. However, given its fragility, Sora felt a little worried. And just as she was thinking this, the jacket suddenly burst into flames, returning her to her naked state, just like before. Meanwhile, Sora could only watch regretfully as her cloak was burned to ashes. She said that some of her dragon characteristics seemed to remain, even though she had transformed into a human. This caused Sora to look back at her in confusion. She confessed that her powers frequently erupted unintentionally, causing everything around her to burst into flames, and that's why she was called Tarrant. Sora turned away, understanding the situation. He thought for a moment, searching for a fabric that could withstand her flames. Sora looked around, noticing the trees were still burning since she appeared, and wondered if he could use them. Tarrant wasn't sure since humans aren't capable of resisting fire, but he was determined not to give up. He told her to look at him, then said that even if faced with the wrath of a dragon, if the wood hadn't been burned to ashes, it could still be used. He relied on his analytical and synthesis skills to accomplish that. Sora took the still burning logs and restructured them to create fabric suitable for the fire dragon. With the result being a brand new outfit, he placed it on Myuu, awaiting its new owner. Proud of her work, Sora told Tarrant to try it out, and she was amazed by his strength. She couldn't believe he could transform burnt wood into such a perfect object. She realized the amazing potential of human beings. She then asked how she could put it on, since she wasn't familiar with how humans dress. Although slightly surprised, Sora told her to turn around so he could stand opposite her and show her how to put on the outfit properly. However, the sight Sora saw left him gasping for breath. Scars from previous battles still covered much of her back, The wounds certainly still hurt, but compared to before, her condition is much better now. Quickly, Sora helped her put on new clothes and gave her more medicine. Then the two of them set off for his house. As he moved through the forest, Terrant had the opportunity to become familiar with his new body. Therefore, moving around became easier, and she felt much more comfortable. She looked at him with a radiant smile wearing her new outfit, and asked him how he felt about it. Sora complimented her gently, but inwardly he was full of pride in his own skills. However, as he continued his journey, he suddenly became pensive, and his expression turned thoughtful. He felt that the name Terrant no longer seemed to suit her. After some thought, he suggested changing her name to Leica to better match her new appearance. After a moment of consideration, Leica quickly agreed, beaming and happily accepting her new name, feeling it was truly perfect for her. At the same time, Sora suddenly remembered her wounds and wondered if the Wolf King was really that powerful. Leica couldn't deny that Fenrirer's power was undeniable. With its ability to control icy cold, it could freeze everything in sight. Fenrirer, the Ice Wolf, surpassed her even in physical strength. While they don't cause trouble with their power, they simply hate anyone who trespasses into their territory, including those who inadvertently stumble upon it. Generally speaking, approaching Fenrirer territory is a reckless act, and the creatures usually keep their distance from each other. However, now a wind of change is blowing, pushing them into an inevitable confrontation. Leica looked at Sora, her eyes full of contemplation, and told him that the entire forest used to belong to her. However, when the White Whale, the Phoenix, and the Wolf King arrived, the forest was divided into 4 territories. Each territory is reserved for a powerful monster. Leica felt heartbroken to have to say that now there was a 5th entity, disrupting that balance of power. Because so many creatures in the forest had been petrified by the presence of the 5th entity, many flocked to the Wolf King's territory. Sora didn't want to think about the consequences of this, but the Dragon Girl only confirmed his fears. That he was the 5th entity she was talking about. The 3 continued their journey through the forest with Leica as their guide, while Sora's mind was filled with questions. He wondered how much power he needed to possess to be considered the 5th lord of this forest. Sora couldn't understand why anyone would consider her something scary. Leica stopped, turned around, and showed the two of them the magical wooden walls that Sora had created. They were just looking at the wooden fences surrounding his shelter. The most ordinary things in the world. However, the Great Dragon King believed it was sophisticated technology, designed by Sora to repel monsters. The Dragon Girl spoke with such seriousness that Sora felt as if he were facing chess pieces in her hands. He opened the gate and invited them inside. Lucy looked around, amazed by the strangeness and unfamiliarity of the place. Every man-made structure in the area felt strange to her. She looked at the shelves and thought that this might be Sora's nesting place, even though it was really just a storage area. Sora led her to the door to show her her living space. The girl didn't understand because she had never seen a door before, so to her, it was just an ordinary wall. Sora opened the door, showing her the interior fully furnished, with a kitchen and a bed. Everything was new and unfamiliar to Leica. It felt like she had stepped into a whole different world, and she was as happy as a child visiting Disneyland for the first time. Sora told her to take a shower so she could treat the wound on her back more carefully. Sora asked Myuu to help Leica in the bathroom. He was left alone in the kitchen. He took the frozen meat from the refrigerator and sliced it into small pieces. While working, he constantly complained about his bad luck, being bound to a skill he considered useless, only to become so powerful that he inadvertently disrupted the entire ecosystem of the monster forest. He felt guilty. He thought he was responsible for Leica's injuries. Later, Leica tried the dish Sora had prepared and was incredibly surprised by its unique, unfamiliar, and captivating flavor. Compared to her daily meals, even though they only consisted of pork, Sora revealed that his secret ingredient is salt. Sora took out a jar of rock salt that he had created using alchemy. He boasted to Lucy that he had a full stockpile of salt. Lucy, out of curiosity, tasted it straight from the jar and put so much into her mouth that she coughed violently, struggling to swallow but unable to. Sora and Myuu rushed to get water to help her. After things calmed down, the 3 of them sat down on the sofa in the living room. Lucy felt comfortable in the chair and couldn't help but be amazed by human ingenuity. How they could create such miraculous tools and powders. Suddenly, Sora bowed his head, his eyes filled with remorse, and he apologized for causing the wound on her back and for disrupting the order of the forest. Sora was still listing his mistakes when the Dragon Girl suddenly hugged him. She said that despite his errors, she still admired him for having enough power to disrupt their entire ecosystem. She went on to share that he had opened her eyes to the potential of human beings, and that his humility and kindness had made up for everything that had happened. For that reason, she insisted she would never blame him for her problems. However, she insisted that they resolve the territorial dispute as soon as possible. Flames emanated from her body, harmonizing with her resolute words, clearly demonstrating her determination. Myuu felt worried for her, but the dragon girl remained resolute, determined to face the wild beast Wolf King no matter what. Although Lucy tried to maintain her warrior pride, Sora noticed she was trembling, her hands and feet weak from the wounds sustained in the previous battle. Despite her resolute words, he understood that she was greatly weakened, and he worried that she wouldn't be able to continue fighting. Sora, with her carefully considered plan, Sora stated that stopping the Wolf King wasn't just her responsibility, but that of all creatures in the forest. He asserted that it was also his responsibility, and that he wouldn't leave her to face it alone. He stood up, his eyes filled with determination, and said that he wanted to combine his strength with hers. His words moved Lucy so much that she almost cried, sensing Sora's dedication and unwavering determination. Lucy thought for a moment and then said that she would need Sora's help, and so they both left the cave, ready to face their enemy. Although worried that Lucy hadn't fully recovered, Sora found her resolute in insisting that she felt fine. He checked his condition and realized that his health had fully recovered. Myuu also went with them, and the three of them entered the forest together. Sora began to suggest that they needed a strategy before invading Wolf King's territory. However, Lucy was not pleased with this offer. She bluntly replied that she often plunged into battle without any planning whatsoever. Sora continued to insist that planning ahead was the best way to win, which only further irritated Lucy. However, Sora remained adamant and refused to change her mind. Finally, seeing the seriousness in his eyes and feeling guilty, she apologized for her earlier disagreement. Sora smiled gently and said it was all right, that he really liked seeing her sincere side. His words made Lucy's heart flutter, her face flushed, and she couldn't look him in the eye. Meanwhile, Sora, innocently unaware, asked Myuu if he had done anything wrong to upset her. They continued their journey to the river, the boundary between Lucy's territory and the Wolf Kingdom. Lucy reminded her companions to always be vigilant because from now on, everything could change. A chill began to envelop the space, their breaths turning into thin mist in the air. Suddenly, the sharp spikes of a blizzard appeared, engulfing the entire area. Sora sensed the tension, foreshadowing a fierce battle. Suddenly, the mighty Wolf Kingdom appeared, its colossal form like a giant mountain, casting a shadow over them. The wolf's eyes were filled with contempt, as if they were nothing more than tiny ants. Lucy showed no fear. She advanced forward with determination in her eyes. This time, she would face the monster, but not alone. She had powerful allies fighting alongside her. Lucy's body burst into raging flames, and instantly, from within the fire, her gigantic dragon form gradually emerged. The Wolf King immediately called her by the name Tarrant, his eyes revealing clear contempt. Wangso believed she had humbled herself by befriending humans, and even adopting their form. The beast's rage surged, and it summoned gigantic ice spikes aimed at her. But before they could reach him, Sora lunged forward, using his Ashura skill to slice the ice spikes into pieces. The appearance of a human being was able to stop the Wolf King's attack, startling the beast. Sora looked at Lucy and Myuu, ordering them to get ready. The battle officially began when Sora signaled for the team to charge into battle. Seeing that the Dragon King allowed a human to lead, the Wolf King became even more contemptuous of his own kind. The Wolf King viewed humans as nothing more than weak, easily trampled creatures. The snowstorm grew increasingly fierce, reflecting the Wolf King's rage at a weakling who dared to challenge him. Sora watched the storm and felt relieved that everything was going according to plan. Suddenly, a memory flooded back. Before his group arrived in the Wolf King's territory, Sora had asked Lucy about the enemy's fighting style. With a serious expression, Lucy prepared to offer an explanation, much to Sora's anticipation. Sora was surprised when Lucy admitted she had no information about the Wolf King's fighting style. She explained that the monster's control over the freezing weather had rendered her blind during the previous battle. Hearing this, Sora immediately realized the solution. They need to dispel the snowstorm using Lucy's fire powers. Returning to the present, Lucy used her powerful flames to incinerate the surrounding space, causing the snow to melt into steam. The Wolf King, taken aback, became curious to see her using her intelligence in battle. However, shortly afterward, the combination of cold and heat caused all the snow to quickly disappear. The Wolf King lost his patience and immediately attacked, scratching at Lucy's back wound, causing it to widen. Sora quickly ordered her to fly up, preparing to face the next attack. The wolf attacked Lucy again before she could take flight. Lucy commented on her opponent's speed, but Sora reassured her not to worry, as the absence of a snowstorm meant she still had a chance to win. The wolf continued to attack Lucy, and although it landed blows, it couldn't inflict serious injuries. Sora carefully observed the wolf's movements, realizing it was targeting Lucy's blind spot. To counter this, he summoned earthen walls, pushing the wolf away from Lucy. His interference angered the wolf. Sora immediately ordered Myuu to take action. The sesame vine stretched taut and wrapped around the entire body of the Wolf King. The wolf tried to freeze its surroundings in preparation for a counterattack, but it realized that nothing happened. Sora asked if they ever wondered why their powers weren't activating. He explained to the animals that Myuu had eaten a mountain of salt until its body had converted to a high concentration of salt, making it difficult for the water in its body to freeze. Lucy pinned the wolf to the ground. While they stood motionless, the Dragon Queen told the beast that it was time for her to settle accounts. In her human form, she declared this to be revenge. The surrounding environment erupted with power from their confrontation. Myuu turned back to Sora, who was proud of the little one's performance. He praised, "Well done." He told Myuu not to worry about Lucy, assuring her that their dragon friend would win. The confrontation between the wolf and the dragon continues. The wolf told the Dragon King that she was no match for it. Suddenly, Lucy lunged forward, inflicting excruciating pain on the wolf. She said she couldn't win it, but only when she was alone. She shouted that they would win together, confronting them head-on. The ground beneath their feet suddenly crumbled, and Lucy realized they were fighting on a frozen river. Both warriors fell into the water. The Wolf King gradually lost consciousness. Beneath the water's surface, they sank into despair, realizing their notion of strength derived from solitude had been shattered. They waited for the Dragon King to seal their fate, resigned to their destiny. They looked back, remembering all they had ever wished for: to live peacefully alone. The dragon carried the wolf's carcass to the surface of the water along with itself. The animals, surprised, asked why she had saved them, and Lucy replied that Sora had told her to do it. Sora knelt down, her head bowed low towards the Wolf King. Sora apologized for the fight and begged them to engage in dialogue. He admitted that he was the fifth presence, the one who caused the chaos in the forest, and apologized for causing them trouble. Lucy returned to her human form, looked at the Wolf King, and said that having friends is the true path to becoming strong. Lucy advised them not to keep themselves isolated from others. Sora replied that he didn't entirely agree with her. He shared that he had lived alone for a long time, and that experience had brought advantages that those with many friends could never understand. The Wolf King refused to accept that they were alike, and the Wolf King requested to be spared from his speeches, wishing to be killed immediately. Sora replied that he had no right to end their lives, as he respected their solitude just as he respected his own solitude. He promised to leave the forest so that everything could go back to how it was. Sora swore to the Wolf King that their solitude would be protected once again. The Wolf King recalled the countless times they had fought relentlessly, simply to protect their solitude, and no one understood why. The Wolf King asked Sora why he made concessions when he didn't need to. Sora replied that he couldn't trample on what others valued. To prove his sincerity, he placed a bottle of medicine on the ground, hoping they would use it before leaving. The Wolf King suddenly asked them to wait, causing the three to turn around, curious to know what they were about to say. The wolves couldn't simply abandon someone. The Wolf King asked who understood their loneliness, and requested Sora to take them along. Lucy was so exhausted that she suspected they were up to something. The wolf told the boy that it was up to him whether he believed them to be honest or not. Sora asked if they intended to join her ranks. Lucy wondered why they wanted to cooperate with Sora, and the wolf asked her for her reason. Lucy revealed that it was because they had made a formal agreement, agreeing to cooperate knowing this. The Wolf King volunteered to accept a similar pact. The boy asked if they really wanted it, because he didn't know if the contract could be broken. However, the wolf offered no objection. Sora summoned the Oath Necklace. When the Wolf King reached out to take it, they reflected on finally finding someone who truly understood them. As the wolf's claws touched the collar, it was instantly encased in ice. Inside the block of ice was the figure of a girl, her eyes having just opened. The Wolf King broke through the ice, now possessing a human body. She reflected on her hope of learning more about Sora in the future, as he had become an integral part of her life. Lucy and Myuu stood staring at the Wolf Queen, astonished to discover that she was a girl. While noticing that the Wolf King was still undressed, Lucy's eyes quickly darted towards Sora with a hint of jealousy. After transforming into a human, the Wolf King began to advance towards Sora. She wanted Sora, but Lucy quickly stopped her and hastily ordered Sora to make clothes for her. Sora immediately created an outfit for Fenrirer, the Wolf King, with a design that fit perfectly like gloves. Lucy told her that wearing clothes was normal for humans, so she needed to wear them all the time. Meanwhile, Sora had just finished making boots from the surrounding ice blocks. This both surprised and annoyed him, because the clothes he created, which weren't made from wolf ice, froze instantly when the girl put them on. The female wolf stepped into her new boots. Sora asked her if any of her clothes were too tight or too loose, and she replied that she liked them all very much. Lucy wanted to know from Sora whether they planned to take Fenrirer with them, because she remained skeptical about the werewolf woman's motives and felt uncomfortable about it. Fenrirer asked them not to call her Fenrirer, as that wasn't the name she had chosen. Lucy understood and sympathized because she herself had never agreed with her own name. Sora thought for a moment and then asked if she wanted to be called Phalis. The wolf woman was silent for a moment, contemplating the offer. She felt as if the name was calling her and agreed to accept it. Myuu immediately called her Phalis without a moment's hesitation. The female wolf was delighted to see the little slime, excitedly congratulating her, and they quickly formed a close bond. Sora noticed that Lucy seemed uncomfortable accepting Phalis so easily, as if she didn't really want to get to know her. However, deep down, he felt it was his responsibility to protect and shelter her. He asked the wolf woman about her wounds, but she replied that all her wounds disappeared when she transformed into her human form. This left Sora wondering why Lucy's wounds didn't heal on their own. When Phalis first transformed into a human, Sora told the girls that he would prepare a special treat to welcome their new friend. Lucy was so excited that any doubts she had about Phalis completely vanished. The group continued to gather spices from the surrounding plants. Sora told the girls that with the growing number of members, they needed to add more spice and ingredients. He promised that it would all be worth it to make their meal more delicious. However, he wished they had more wheat, and began teaching the girls about this grain. Phalis felt like he understood what he was saying and knew exactly where to find them. Phalis led the group to an area with plants that looked like wheat. Sora examined them carefully and used his assessment skills to check if they were exactly what he was looking for. He was silent for a moment, prompting Phalis to ask if they were the kind of plants he had been searching for all this time. Suddenly, Sora took her hand, thanking her for bringing him rice. He told Lucy to be happy, because he was about to make a dish that she would really like. Myuu was the most excited, dancing around with joy. The dragon girl asked if they had everything they needed. Sora replied that there was one more thing they needed to find. Sora led the group to the edge of a cliff and pointed toward berries growing on the steep slope of the hillside. Lucy volunteered to retrieve them, jumping down determined to help Sora, just like Phalis. The dragon girl landed on a very steep slope, nearly falling, but was still proud to have managed to grab some berries. However, the ground beneath her feet suddenly collapsed, causing her to fall. She worried that if she transformed into a dragon, the berries would be burned, so she didn't know what to do. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through and a platform of ice appeared, stopping Lucy's fall and saving her from disaster. The dragon girl realized that Phalis had just saved her, but was confused about how to express her gratitude. The wolf girl explained that she only did it because she owed Leica a favor, but to the dragon girl, the act felt humiliating. That evening at the lair, Sora brought a meal of homemade curry rice. When Phalis was absent, Sora told Leica and Myuu to eat first, while he would take the curry plate to the wolf girl outside. He found Phalis sitting alone, and she couldn't help but be amazed by the unique dish Sora made, which made her believe that he could do anything. Sora sat down beside her, enjoyed the food, and savored the wonderful taste after a long time without eating curry. Although Phalis wasn't too surprised, she had to admit that the food was really delicious. The wolf girl told Sora that she felt strange eating a meal prepared for her by someone else. She recalled that she had never before received food from creatures who worshipped her. However, now the curry and the shirt he gave her have become inexplicably important to her. She cried. She couldn't understand her own feelings. Sora took out a handkerchief and gave it to her to wipe away her tears. Unexpectedly, the girl leaned her head against his chest and said that it wasn't just the curry that made her cry, but also her heart. She asked him to allow her to be near him a little longer, and so Sora and Phalis remained there. After a while, Myuu and Leica ran outside to look for the two of them. Leica told Sora to quickly go inside. But when she saw the two of them embracing in the darkness, she couldn't help but be surprised. Her appearance only made Phalis hug Sora tighter. Sora hastily explained to the angry dragon girl that they only did it because it was too cold. Leica's anger flared up when she told him she had the ability to warm him. Sora anxiously tried to reassure her, but Phalis still leaned against him, her face beaming with happiness and peace. What they didn't know was that a giant bird was perched on a cliff, looking down at their lair. The creature remarked that the Dragon King and the Wolf King had completely fallen under human control. What puzzled them was that these divine creatures had transformed into human form. The monstrous giant bird found Sora interesting. Inside the lair, Sora tells Phalis that he has a feeling they are being watched. Phalis felt the same way, but she wasn't sure his feeling watched in a dangerous forest was normal. She noticed Sora was holding something and asked him about it. He revealed that it was a piece of a furnace he had just built, a tool used for blowing fire. He said he was able to create it thanks to the Inferno Blaze skill he received when he made a pact with Leica, combined with metal. Sora went on to tell Phalis that he had improved the refrigerator after she received the freezing skill from Leica. The wolf girl was intrigued to learn that he could create mystical tools with such a simple skill. Before Sora could explain the tool's purpose, Leica returned with Myuu. Myuu unexpectedly lunged at Sora. When he asked why, he realized that holding this slime didn't hurt at all, and he also felt there was something unusual about this little slime. Leica explained that the slime had licked some sap from a rubber tree beforehand and transformed into something more pliable. Leica saw the oven, so Sora showed her the cooking appliance. After dinner, Leica thanked him for the satisfying meal. The dishes were completely new to Leica, unlike anything she'd ever eaten before. Sora explained that thanks to the new oven, he could easily prepare a wider variety of dishes. Myuu is washing dishes for them. Sora started the meeting to discuss the next steps. He declared that he wanted to escape the forest, and he said it in such a serious tone that the girls knew he really intended to do so. He recounted the story of being transported to the jungle and initially focusing solely on survival. But now, with the two animals by his side, he longs to explore the outside world. Phalis said she felt the same way, having tried to escape the forest before. Phalis always viewed survival in the jungle as a struggle, and constantly longed to get out and experience freedom. She informed Sora that the forest was surrounded by a giant, magical labyrinth, causing anyone who entered to be drawn back into the forest, no matter how hard they tried. She pleaded that they must conquer the labyrinth if they wanted to escape this place. They both agreed that they would do it together, and Myuu was happy to join in. Sora asked Leica if she would agree to participate. The dragon girl suddenly fell silent, her face filled with worry. She told the group that she couldn't cross the wall with them. Her answer brought a moment of silence to the room. Leica explained that although she wanted to be with Sora, her presence in the forest was necessary to maintain the balance of the ecosystem there. She feared that if she left, the animals would be plunged into endless conflict. She believed that her great power came with great responsibility, and she reminded Sora that she still longed for peace in the forest even as she faced death. When they met Phalis, the wolf girl strongly disagreed with Leica, saying she was being too extreme. Phalis argues that Leica's strength shouldn't confine her to duty, and that a forest that cannot survive without them doesn't deserve to exist. Sora felt the wolf girl was going a bit too far, but Phalis didn't care. Leica remained adamant that she couldn't be with Sora because she couldn't abandon the forest. Leica cried and apologized for not being able to be with them. Sora sensed her feelings, and he said that he had no right to force her, because he could never understand her deep love for the forest. He apologized to her, saying he felt he shouldn't have rushed into signing the agreement with her like that. He wished there was a way for the creatures in the forest to live in order without Leica's presence. He thought for a moment and suddenly realized there was a solution. But before they could say anything, their house suddenly began to shake. Phalis realized this wasn't just an earthquake. She smelled lightning and sensed the worst was about to happen. She rushed outside, leading everyone else to follow. They discovered they were up against the Phoenix. The Phoenix landed on the fence, staring intently at Leica and Phalis. The Phoenix asked why they were in human form. Unwilling to answer that question, the Phoenix went on to introduce itself as the fifth legendary presence. Sora also introduced herself. They then moved on to discussing the cave and that it should be the man's territory. These creatures want to establish a non-interference agreement. The negotiations continued with discussions about which territories could be exchanged. Phalis interrupted Phoenix, announcing that she would be leaving the forest with Sora. This idea offended the giant bird. Sora added that territory meant nothing to him. The Phoenix speculated that the Wolf King's territory would be divided between the Dragon King and themselves. Phoenix told Leica that they would work together to maintain order in the forest. But Sora immediately corrected them, insisting that Leica would also leave the forest. Leica didn't understand why he said that. Sora's words enraged the Phoenix, which considered it an insult that even the Dragon King dared to dream of abandoning his responsibilities. The Phoenix's fury summoned a storm of thunder and lightning. Sora promised Leica that he would find a way to protect the forest and asked her to trust him. Then he turned to the Phoenix and drew his sword. He told the beast that he had been waiting to meet them, to begin his plan. The Phoenix flew up into the sky, but they didn't understand what Sora was saying. However, they vowed to make him pay for daring to steal the Dragon King and the Wolf King. The Phoenix's lightning strike was so powerful that the entire cave exploded. Sora's group was forced to fall off the cliff and into the forest below. They saw the Phoenix still flying high in the sky, watching them. This creature warns that the worst is yet to come. The ground shook. The earth beneath their feet crumbled, As if something enormous was rising from the depths of the earth, a giant beluga whale emerged from the ground. The beluga whale was larger than any animal guardian Sora had ever encountered before. Just one simple move made the whole group jump away in surprise. The Phoenix asked the beluga whale to lend them its strength. The two animal guardians stood before the group, looking like giants about to trample them. Sora asked the others to help prepare for the upcoming battle.